but he said, I stood before this red light, and he said, I was given to believe that this being was responsible for the creation of the world. And in my book, that would warrant the definition of God, but he didn't say that. And he said, I stood before this being who was responsible for the universe. And he said, I was very uncomfortable. And he said, I kind of reviewed some things in my mind, and then I was kind of whisked back, and I came back. He had another near-death experience after that. I was just telling Dr. Flew today, when I was up in Canada teaching recently, a person showed me an article from a British journalist who said that, and the article implied, that in the last year of his life, between these near-death experiences and when Dr. Ayer did pass away, the journalist implied that Dr. Ayer converted to Christianity, and what he said was he became friends with a very well-known Jesuit philosophical scholar, F.C. Copleston, and a guy whose history of philosophy books, excellent books, are still read and studied today. And they were antagonists throughout their life, but in the last year of his life, they became very close friends, and Dr. Copleston would visit Dr. Ayer regularly after this near-death experience. But before all that, before the Copleston visits, Dr. Ayer said at the end of his article, What I Saw When I Died. He said at the end of the article, he said, I had this near-death experience. I kind of think there were some things there that were true. I'm more open to life after death than I ever have been before. And he said, but to all my friends in America, this article was published in an American magazine. He said, to all my friends in America, don't worry, I'm still an atheist. And that's how he ended his article. Although, like I said, subsequently he started meeting with this Jesuit philosopher. They got to be very good friends. Now, let me say for last, I'm not saying this is the best case, but it might be the most interesting case. A book was published in 1998 called Light and Death. The author of the book is Michael Sabom, the cardiologist whom I discussed a little while ago. He is still said to have written the best scientific book on this subject. It's a 1982 book with Harper and Row, and it's called Recollections of Death, A Medical Perspective. Recollections of Death, A Medical Perspective. Because he's got statistics on how many people had this and what kind of experiences they had. He had a control group, and he reported what these people saw versus what the NDEers saw. And the NDEers, by the way, were more accurate than the control group who had open heart surgery. So all this is in the book, and it's a very scientific look at this. And this book has been praised for being very careful and everything else. Mike Sabom is one of the scholars, one of the scientists, who gave the name near-death experience to the experience. Well, in 1998, he did a follow-up book. It's called Light and Death. And in this book, he said this. He said, in 1982, we called these things near-death experiences, and we couldn't get more exact than that. But he says as science gets more and more exact, our definitions do also. And he said because of these instruments we have and the abilities we have right now, he said since that time, we have some post-death cases. You think, whoa. For this guy who's been so particular in 1982 to say that's near death, that's near death, that's near death, how come the guy's going to say now, here's an after-death experience? Well, he tells the story of an Atlanta housewife in her 30s, and she had a brain aneurysm. I do not know if this is still true, but at the time, I believe, there was only one person in the world who did the kind of surgery I'm going to describe, and that Dr. Sabom takes a chapter to describe. And it's a medical doctor in Phoenix, Arizona. And they flew her to Phoenix, and what the doctor does is this. He cuts into the skull for brain aneurysm, and if the vessel is right there on top, he repairs it, puts things back together, and, usually it's very positive results. But they really don't know until they get in. And if the vessel they have to repair is very deep in the brain, they can't work on it. And so what they do is institute a practice that's come to be known as, quote, Operation Standstill, quote unquote, which colloquially you'd say they kill the patient. They have to shut this person's body down in order to get into their brain. So with her on the table, he opened up her skull, and he ascertained that this blood vessel was too far in there, and they couldn't work on it. So they had to cool her body down to 59 degrees. They drained all the blood out of her head. They recycled it. And they manually stopped her heartbeat. And then her brain shut down just a short time later. And she was in the state, she was in surgery for several hours. And she was in this state for well over an hour, where she had no heartbeat and no brainwave activity. And she said, when he started cutting, she said she came out, she said, and I watched the rest of the procedure as if I were sitting in his lap or looking over his shoulder. And she started reporting things about the room. And she said, I saw this, and I saw this. And she said, hey, doctor, what was that saw thing you were using? And he said, draw it. So she takes her pen, and she draws this picture. And she said, I pictured some kind of thing with a great big saw on the end of it. And she said, it looked like a pen, just a regular pen. And he said, draw it. So she draws this thing. There's drawings in the book. And it looks like a pen with a little half-moon opening and a little tiny, whatever, little blade right here. And you can see the drawing in the book, and you can see the photograph of the tool. And she said, what was that thing looking like a lug wrench set next to you? He said, lug wrench? And she said, yeah, sitting on the table next to you. And he said, draw it. And she draws this thing, and it looks like adjustable wrench set where you undo one side and open it up, and they're all. And what she was drawing, of course, was interchangeable saw heads for this. And she drew a picture of that, and they show you. And so she describes the saw, she describes the blades. She'd never seen these things. They tried to go into her right femoral artery. They couldn't get in there. They couldn't get into the vein. So as a cardiologist, there were a team of more than a dozen people in the room that had to work on her and keep everything set during the surgery. And they couldn't get into her right artery, so they had to go to the left side. Well, this is all during this time when she shouldn't have been reporting anything. She said they moved over to the left artery. That was okay. She gave the name of the doctor who decided on the process. This doctor's name, well, when Dr. Sabom got the notes of the surgery, this whole thing was described. They couldn't go in the right. They had to go in the left. Here's the doctor who said it. All told, she mentioned 6 collaborative points while she shouldn't have been reporting anything. Now, here's the thing about flat brainwave activity. You can have flat brainwave activity and recover. It's very, very rare, but it happens. But if we are physical beings, and there's nothing that outlives the death of our body, and the body is shut down such that there's no brainwave activity or heart activity, then during that time, especially if it's for an hour, during that time, even if something's going on right in front of you, you're not reporting it because you're not, quote, recording it. You're not, things aren't connecting. So it's not a matter of, well, her ears are still working or something like that, because if your brain's not working, your heart's been shut down, she shouldn't be reporting anything. And she reported 6 things in this state, and one of them,